So we're pretty close now. We really just need to add the feature to allow our user to view the tweets of all the users that they are following. So let's make it happen. We're going to need, of course, a new activity. So it's just going to be a plain blank activity. And this is going to be view feed. And I'll have the title as your feed. And we do want a parent this time. So let's choose the user list as the parent. So then we can use the back button to go back to the user list if we want to. Here we go. So your feed is going to be another nice list view. And you can see that, as we've seen a few times, we've got item 1 and sub item 1 here. Now, we've never actually used sub item 1, but here it would be quite useful, I think, because we could use it for the username and maybe even the date and time of the tweet. So I think it's a good excuse to see how to work with item 1 and sub item 1. And let's do that then over in view feed here. So first off, let's create our list view. And actually, we're almost certainly going to need to do that up here. So that's, of course, a list view. Find it by ID, r.id.listView. So first off, let's see how we would use the item 1 and sub item 1 before we get into loading the data from parse. Well, first off, we're going to create a list, which is going to be a list of maps. Now, we haven't used maps a great deal in the course, but we did cover them back at the beginning. Essentially, a map allows you to literally map a string to another string. So that's going to be useful here because we can have our item 1s in one part of the map and our sub items in another part of the map. So I'll call this tweet data, and this is going to be a new array list of maps from string to string. And I'm just going to create this list with a for loop for a moment. So we'll have an int I. I'm going to start at 1 for once. We'll keep going as long as I is less than 5, and then we'll increment I each time. And then we'll create our map to store in our tweet data list. So the map, remember, is string to string. And I'll just call this tweet. And this is a new hash map from string to string. And it's going to contain 2 data items. So we'll put a 2 there. And then we're going to take our tweet and we're going to put the content. So that's going to come first here, and for the content, I'm just going to use tweet content, and then we'll use I just to differentiate between each one. Now, I would like to, even though you don't actually need to, string value of, just because so that we know that this is an integer, we want to convert it to a string. Then we'll put the, let's say, username, and we'll call it Twitter user, and then again string.value of I. So we're just going to have tweet content 1, tweet content 2, etc., and then Twitter user 1, Twitter user 2. So far we've got a list which contains maps each of which has content and username, which are tweet content 1, tweet content 2, tweet content 3, and tweet content 4. So that's nothing new. What the new stuff is how then we get that into our list view. Well, this time, instead of creating an array adapter, we create a simple adapter, which, as you can imagine, is a slightly different thing and allows us to store more types of content than we can with just a straightforward array adapter. So this is going to be a new simple adapter using this as the context, and then we're using tweet data as the data. Notice we put this earlier on this time rather than at the end like we do with an array adapter. And then we use android.r.layout.simpleListItem2. So this allows us to have our two fields in the list, the content and username. And then we have to specify the names of the variables within our list or within our map. And they are strings. So we create them as an array of strings. It's a new string array containing content and username. So that's just a small array to contain the values of the names of the variables, essentially. And finally, we give an array which contains the IDs of the views where we want to put the data. So essentially the IDs of item 1 there and sub item 1 and those down there as well. So we create an array of integers. And if you want them in the default place, which we certainly do, we use android.r.id.text1 and android.r.id.text2. Phew. So that's a substantially longer line, but you can see we've got a bit more flexibility now using a simple adapter rather than array adapter. And just to recap, we're getting the data from tweet data, and we're using the simple list item 2 layout, which allows us to have the item and the sub item. And then we're creating a small array that contains the names of the variables within the tweet map. And then we're creating integers for the IDs of the two text fields that we want to put the content into. And they are by default text1 and text2. All right, and then finally, we take our list view and we set the adapter, simple adapter. All right. Oh, yep, just before we run that, we're going to need to be able to actually see that. So we'll need to create an intent to jump to that. So let's do that in our menu at the top. And I'll call it your feed. And we'll create an ID feed for it. And then over in user list, I'll actually do it above the existing one. So if ID is r.id.feed, and then we'll just call that an else if, so we don't need to check all of those. So then all we're doing here is creating an intent, which is going to be a new intent within the application context. And we want to jump to viewFeed.class. And then we'll start activity with that intent. All right, so this button will allow us to jump to our new viewFeed activity, which at the moment should display tweet content 1, Twitter user 1, and then tweet content 2, Twitter user 2, etc. Let's see. Here we go. So let's tap on your feed to go over to our new activity. And unfortunately we've got a crash, but I thought I'd leave that in because it's worth noting. The actual error is that we're trying to set the adapter on a null object reference, which means that the list view that we created here does not exist. And what's actually going on is the new list view that we created has a different ID, because IDs have to be different across the whole app. So this is actually list view 2. So I'm actually going to change it to your feed list view. And then instead of list view, so what it was trying to do is link this list view to the list view in user list, which of course was null because user list isn't open. So that was the problem there. We want your feed list view. Or had we just changed that to list view 2, that would have worked as well. But that was a bit too vague for me. And there's actually one more change that I need to make, and that is that I never actually put the tweet that we created here into tweet data. So without that, it wouldn't actually display anything. So tweet data.add and then tweet. Okay, so with any luck now, we should get the tweet content and Twitter user in our table. Let's take a look. So here we go. Let's try your feed. And with any luck, we'll see. There we go. So tweet content 1, Twitter user 1, etc. Okay. So now all that remains is to select the data that we actually want for our tweets and then display it there. So I'm currently following Rob and Tommy. So I'm going to cheat and jump over to Parse to create some other tweets. So let's get some content in there. That one can be from Rob. Add another one. I don't know what I'm doing. From Rob as well. I can be too honest sometimes. What is this? From Tommy, and one more. I like pigs. That is very true. Okay, so there we have our wonderfully informative tweets. So we just need to display those in the, not the user list, but in the view feed, list view. So we're going to need an object query here. So rather than write it out for ourselves and risk getting it wrong, let's get a basic query from Parse. So I'm going to leave that code there because it might be useful to us. Bring in all the classes that we need. And we definitely want the Parse version of that. Okay. So we want to query the tweet class. And we want to find wherever the username is in our isFollowing array. So we can do that using where contained in, and that will look to see, we want to find where the username is contained in, and for this we'll use parse user dot get current user dot get list, and then the list that we want is following. And just a thought there, let's add a quick tweet from Kirsten. This should not be here. So if we see this tweet, then something's gone wrong because we're not following Kirsten. We shouldn't see that tweet. Okay, I want to set the order as well. So order by descending, and we'll set it by date. So created at, and we want the newest ones first. And finally, I'm going to limit the number as well. So set limit, we'll set it to 20 tweets. Not that that's a problem here, but it could be as the app grows and gets hugely popular. Okay, so I think we've got a correct query there. So if there's no exceptions, and we don't really want to call it score list, we'll call it tweet objects. Makes more sense. And I'll get rid of that log actually. So if tweet objects.size is greater than 0, then we want to loop through them. So for tweet object, which is going to be a pass object, and we want to get all the tweet objects in tweet objects. And then this is where we're going to bring in our map. So we'll create a new map as before, but this time the content is going to be the content of our tweet, which is just tweet object.get string, and then the string is content, and then again with username we use tweet object.get string again and username. Okay, we just need to set tweet data, and that's because it's created up here. So we don't actually need to keep track of tweet data because we're not going to be allowing the user to tap on this table or anything like that. Although that might be a great initial extra feature if you want to take this app further. So we'll add the tweet to tweet data. We now no longer need this, but we do need to create the adapter, which we'll do after the loop has completed there. And we'll actually need to define this simple adapter outside of the pass query. So we will need to slightly shake things up a little bit. So we'll define the simple adapter there, which means that we'll need to define tweet data elsewhere as well. It's not a major problem. So we'll just define it outside and then set it up not quite there, because we'll get an error if it's not initiated. There we go. So we've set up tweet data. We've then set up the simple adapter to work with tweet data, and the list view is already there. And then all we need now is to set the adapter to the list view, which we're doing. So fingers crossed, that should get all the tweet data from pass of the users that we're following. So we should get these 4 in the middle. So the 2 from me and 2 from Tommy. Ralphie can't follow himself, so we're not going to get that one. and we shouldn't get that one either because we're not following Kirsten. Let's take a look. Okay, so we'll tap your feed and let's have a look. There we go. Wonderful. So we've got I like pigs. What is this? I don't know what I'm doing, and this is great. So we've definitely got all the right tweets that we want, and they're in the right order as well, because we wanted the newest ones first. And just to really confirm that everything's working, if we tap back and select Kirsten and deselect Rob and Tommy, we can now look at the feed and it should just show this should not be here. There we go. Wonderful. So that completes as far as we're going to go on the Twitter app. Of course, there's a lot more that you can do with this. It's pretty basic in its current form, just providing the essential functionality of Twitter. But we don't have any functionality like retweeting or replying or direct messaging or anything like that. But really, all of that is just a user interface question and doesn't do anything that we haven't learned how to do already. So I hope you enjoyed making this Twitter app. There's only one more section left, and that is our Snapchat clone.